Welcome to the VAT integrated question. What I'd like you to do is I would like you to try do this question first, and then once you have done the question, what I would like you to do is come back to this video and watch how I approach it from an exam technique perspective. So please try do the question. It's a 50-mark question. It should take you 75 minutes to do, with 15 minutes of reading time. So 15 minutes reading time, 75 minutes to do it. And once you have done it, please come back to this video. Press pause now or restart the video later. So let's start going through the question itself. So before you start doing a question, what you need to do is you need to make sure you know, first of all, what type of vendor the company is. As you can see here, it's a C category vendor. What does C mean? It means that VAT is levied on a monthly basis itself. And what else? All amounts include VAT unless otherwise stated. So everything includes VAT unless otherwise stated. So we just need to understand that. Okay, so let's start having a look at the required itself. So first question in the required is this one. And let me just explain what I tried to actually get you guys to do here. This is a 20-mark question. There are 5 scenarios, and they tell you the number of marks per scenario. This question is approached very differently from the second question, which they've given you a 16-mark discussion to discuss many transactions. So this question, part B, you don't know how many marks each transaction is for. Okay, whereas with this question, you do. And the way that we approach them is totally different. Okay, so let's have a look at things for the first time. It says, discuss the VAT implications considering the following transactions. So we're only looking at VAT implications. And it says the possible receipts of the grant of 20 million to produce automotive glass. How many marks? 2. So very, very short discussion that we need to do. Discussion questions, there may be some extra bonus marks in the question. So this might be 3 marks limited to 2, 4 marks limited to 2. So we need to deal with the possible receipt of the grant of 20,000 to produce auto glass inside this question. So looking at the question, what does it say? It says to support the automotive industry, the PG Glass Trust has proposed awarding a once-off upfront grant of 20 million to HGP to encourage HGP to continue to produce motor vehicle windows and windscreens. The initiative was driven by the automotive industry. If HGP accepts this grant, it will have to produce at least 180,000 windscreens for the local automotive manufacturers between 1 January 2021 and 31 December 2024. HGP's board of directors is still debating whether to sign this contract. Now, here's the thing, guys, it's only out of 2 marks. So how should you approach something like this? Well, the first thing you should always do is say, is there a specific section that relates to this transaction? And there is no specific section that relates to this transaction where, like, if it was a fringe benefit, there'd be a fringe benefit section. If there was an insurance claim, there'd be an insurance claim. So there's no specific section that relates to it, so we got to look at things generically. So how do we look at things generically? That is on the supply of goods and services by vendor. So first thing, is there going to be a supply? Are we going to be giving something to the industry? Yes, we're going to have an undertaking that we're going to produce 180,000 windscreens. Okay, supply of a good, it's not a good that we're giving to the PG Glass Trust. It's actually the rendering of a service to them by actually agreeing to actually produce these windscreens. Okay, we're a vendor. Okay, and we're carrying on an enterprise itself. So yes, there will be VAT on the transaction. And the question is, in a discussion question, do we need to do a number crunch? And the question is, yes. If we're given a number, 20 million rand, of course we're going to have to do it. And remember, all amounts include VAT unless otherwise satisfied. Now, with any VAT question as well, we need to do value. We also need to do timing. Okay. Now, there's no specific rule attached onto this transaction, so we'd have to use normal timing rules, which are what? This is a company. It has to be registered on an invoice basis, which would mean it would be on the earlier of payment or invoice, or in this case, when the contract formalities have been complied with and the VAT invoices have been issued. So let's have a look at the actual solution itself. So it says, by agreeing to this contract, the company will be rendering a service to the automotive glass industry. This is the supply of a service by a vendor carrying on an enterprise. Okay, 1 mark. Output VAT, 20 million. All amounts include VAT. When things include VAT, times 15 over 115. Okay, 2608,696 will be accounted for when? Earlier of payment or invoice. Available 3, limited to 2. I'm absolutely sure you could write down more than that. But remember, this is only out of 2 marks, so we have to limit our response. Okay? Just because we can write out stuff doesn't mean that we should write out stuff. Let's carry on. It says the import of the prototype machine and the software payment to OI Incorporated for the December VAT return, and there are 5 marks allocated for this. So let's read through the question. It says research and development includes payments of 40 million annually to OI Incorporated, a USA registered company, for research on a new glass manufacturing process. OI is a world leader which sells its patented machines to participating companies, i.e. companies that contribute to its R&D processes. OI's latest development is Magma, a flexible standard glass production line, which enable rapid movable capacity expansion in smaller increments. A prototype costing $800,000 was ordered. The goods were shipped FOB on 22 November when the exchange rate was $1 equals 14 Rand 80, and paid on 1 December when the exchange rate was $1 equals 15. An OI prototype and pilot operating with the new technology was brought into use at HGP's Gauteng plant late in financial year 2020. The machine was received at Durban Harbour on 5 December 2020. An additional amount of 5 million was spent for the software that operates the machine on 10 December. Import duties and surcharges of 1.5 million were charged at the port. And there's a little 1 there, and what does 1 say? Except 12 million is the customs duty value recognized at the port. It says the transactions were denoted in dollars, and you may assume that the conversions to rands are all correct. Okay, so what do we need to do when we go through stuff? We need to understand that there are 2 transactions here. What are the transactions? Transaction 1 is the import of the machine, and transaction 2 is the import of software. So 1, okay, a machine being imported. Number 2, software being imported. How many marks is this question out of? Okay, this question is out of 5 marks. The import of the prototype machine and the software payment, 2 things inside the solution that we need to do, but we only need to understand what to do for the December VAT return itself. Now, this question says discuss. Does that mean we need to number crunch? Of course we need to number crunch. And obviously, we're going to number crunch stuff because that's the easier marks in the question. So with the import of the machine, there's a special rule that you need to actually know. What is the value of that transaction itself? Now, this is where the VAT legislation sheet comes into play. If you can't remember the rules, if you've got things highlighted and in your bundles themselves, you can just go find valuation of goods imports. And what does it say? Valuation of goods plus the duty levied increased by a factor of 10%. Botswana, Swaziland, Lesotho, Namibia not to be increased by a factor of 10% itself. So as far as this is concerned, if you want to actually go and you want to answer it, we can do that. So what did it say? Customs duty value, 12 million. Now, guys, you need to specify how much VAT is actually being paid When we take something across the border, it's output VAT, so 1 mark for output VAT. Customs duty value, 12 million given in the question. Plus 10% of customs duty value, because this is not coming from Botswana, Swaziland, Lesotho, or Namibia. As per the question, how much were our import surcharges themselves? Our import surcharges, guys, are in the question 1.5 million over here. So what are we going to do? Add on the import surcharges. And then we've got to calculate VAT. Now remember, this number does not include VAT at this point in time. Why? Because it's come from overseas. There's no South African VAT on it. So to work out the amount of VAT, what do you need to do? You need to times it by 15%. That'll give you your amount of VAT. Now the question's only out of 5. Do you think that you need to write down more than that? The only extra thing you can write down is you're going to say, listen, I'm going to pay this at the port, but because I paid it at the port and this machine is used for taxable supplies, I can claim this as input VAT in my December VAT return. So there, input VAT of 2205 in the VAT return itself. Now, there's also software that we download over the internet, and that's an imported service. How do services work? Because it doesn't come through a port, it is treated as an imported service. How do imported services work? We say, if we could claim input VAT on any output VAT that we paid, then we don't need to do anything with the government. The government doesn't need to know about us importing the service if it is purely a VATable transaction. In this case, it is a purely VATable transaction because the machine is going to be used in our production process. But what would you normally say in a question? You'd normally say software is an intangible asset. So how's it going to be treated in terms of the Act as a service? Okay. The service is being imported, and because it's a fully VATable service, we would have paid output, we would have been able to claim the input, ending up in a net null position. We don't even need to do anything with SARS. There's no transaction to take place. So there would be the 3 marks that are available for the service that you could do. Imported service, no VAT implications. Okay. Now, if it wasn't a VATable transaction, okay, an example of that might be music in a call center. That's entertainment, and with entertainment, input VAT is denied. If we were charged output and then we couldn't claim the input, then we need to go declare it to SARS. But imported services where VAT could be claimed, there's nothing that we need to do with that. And that is question 2. Looking at question 3, what are we going to do with question 3? It says for 3 marks, the purchase of soda ash placed in the bonded warehouse, the prepayment for silica sand, and the repurchase buyback of some of the shares. So what are we going to do? 3 marks, 3 items, 1 mark per item. That's what you need to do. Okay, so let's have a look at the question itself. We've got silica sand. So it says, as a result of the pandemic lockdown and the subsequent moratorium on alcohol sales in South Africa, several of HGP's brewery clients are forced to cancel orders for glass bottles. As a result, HGP stored soda ash imported from Botswana, okay, at a cost of that in a bonded warehouse. So tell me, guys, what happens if you store something in a bonded warehouse? Bonded warehouse means there's no VAT that needs to be paid until it gets released from the bonded warehouse, and we just need to actually state that. And then it says an order that's been placed for silica sand during December 2020 was also delayed. The silica sand supplier asked for an amount of 15 million to be placed in a bank trust account for the December order, which was delayed to 6 Jan 2021. The amount was paid into a trust account on 23 December 2020. Okay. Now, guys, it's been paid into a trust account. Okay. If they do not deliver the sand, the money will simply be redeposited to the client itself. So how would a prepayment be dealt with from a VAT perspective? Not all of the conditions have been complied with because it's in a trust account. It is a deposit. Therefore, there is no supply yet. Only when that sand is delivered and the amount gets transferred out of the trust account will there be a supply. So there'll be nothing, as far as December is concerned, placed into the account. And then the third one is on a repurchase of shares. We don't even need to look at the question. What happens with shares? Shares are an exempt financial service and nothing needs to happen with them. So here's the solution. No VAT treatment on the soda ash until it's released from the bonded warehouse. It would seem that the 15 million prepayments in fact a deposit kept in a trust account. It is not a consideration for a supply and therefore no input or output VAT. I know we've paid it, but it hasn't yet been transferred across to the clients for their beneficiation yet. They never ever give away the silica sand. The trust amount will simply be given back to our company. And then repurchase of shares, exempt financial service. Moving on to part 4. It says the loss of the distribution rights and the subsequent sale of the corporate whiskey gift bottles to Lekerdorp. 2 transactions here, 6 marks. Let's go back and let's have a look inside the question on what we need to do here. So remember, there are 2 things we need to do: the cancellation of the right, and we also need to actually do the subsequent sale. So there are 2 transactions. It's out of 6 marks, so 3-3 or 4-2. Okay, normally there should be 8 or 9 marks inside the solution because it's a discussion question. Let's have a look and let's have a read through again. It says HGP had a contract with Hell's Whiskey to bottle 25, 50 and 100 ml whiskey bottles as corporate gifts for the African continent until December 2028. HW supplied the alcohol and HGP manufactured the bottles and managed the bottling of the whiskey. The contract presented HGP with one of its most profitable sales line in the glass corporate gifts division. During financial year 2020, HW decided to enhance its integrated reporting by awarding its African contracts to small and medium-sized and privately owned businesses, SMEs, and consequently approached HGP to negotiate the cancellation of its long-term contract. After protracted negotiations, the agreement was cancelled by mutual consent on 19 December 2020. HW paid 3.25 million to HGP in relinquishing its distribution rights. This was not treated as a discontinued op, as it was not material to its annual financial statements. So guys, there's a cancellation of an agreement here. Okay, so we need to sit there and say, is there a specific section that deals with compensation claims? Absolutely not. What do we need to do? If there's no specific section, we need to go back to basics. So what do we need to do? Normal VAT rule, okay? We need to see whether there's been a supply of a good or service by a vendor in the course of carrying on of its enterprise. So let's think about, have we got a supply? Okay, so if we surrender our right, that is included in the definition of supply. If you're not sure what's in the definition of supply, you can go to section 1 of the Act itself. Okay, and is there a good or a service, guys? Well, you know what? If you look at the definition of service, rights are included in the definition of a service. So we've got a right to actually distribute in South Africa. There will be a service that's involved there. Okay, so has there been a supply of a good or service by a vendor carrying on of an enterprise? Yes, there has been. Okay, however, what we need to do is we're dealing with an overseas company. So we need to see where that right resides. Okay, where it's going to be. Now, there was a court case. Okay, Stellenbosch Farmers Winery court case that is part of a syllabus. And basically inside that case, in the case with Bell's Whiskey, when the right was given up, the right resides in Scotland with the Scottish distillery. And because the right resides in Scotland, this transaction will be 0 rated, and therefore there'll be VAT at a rate of 0%. So let's have a look at the actual solution itself. So first thing, you need to see whether it constitutes a good or service supplied in course of furtherance of an enterprise. It is a supply. Intangible corporeals are rights, are services as supplied, so therefore there is VAT. Can we zero rate it because we're conducting a transaction with a non-resident? And where's the right located? Where the Scottish distillery is. Therefore, it's subject to VAT at a rate of 0%. It's an exported service. And we are able to zero rate this transaction. We still haven't done the subsequent sale. Let's go back to the question and discuss it. It says HGP sold the corporate whiskey bottles that it already had on hand to the Zambian branch of a new distributor, EBSdotCOZA Pty Limited, a South African company owned by a prominent politician. The entire stock was sold for 600,000. The usual selling price would have been 900. And EBSdotCOZA shipping agent collected the goods on 27 December 2020 to transport the goods to Zambia by road. So first thing that we need to actually just do here is we need to decide whether we can zero rate this or not. And you can't zero rate it. You're selling to a South African company. Okay? You're selling to EBSdotCOZA Pty Limited, a South African company. I don't care that the goods are being taken across the border. You're not exporting them to an overseas company. You're selling them to a South African company. Notwithstanding that, their guy is actually taking it across the border. There is no zero rating of an export here because we giving it to a South African company and they're picking it up from us in South Africa. Therefore, how much VAT will there be? All amounts include VAT, so 600,000 Rand times 15 over 115. There it is. So VAT levied because can't zero rate it, being sold to a South African supplier. Let's move on. Next one. The last part. For 3 marks. The director's trip to the international conference, where they incurred costs on air travel, hotel accommodation in Nairobi, okay, and a daily subsistence allowance. 3 items, 3 marks. So, guys, air travel, it's a business trip. It's not a fringe benefit. And what happens with international travel? That is zero rated on international travel. Hotel accommodation in Nairobi, including Kenyan VAT. Guys, it's Kenyan VAT, not South African VAT. You can't claim it. You can only claim South African VAT. So no VAT can be claimed on the hotel stay. And subsistence allowances, they're supplies of cash. Okay? It's a financial service. It's exempt. Okay? Supply of cash. And there'll be no VAT on that. So let's have a look at the solution. International air ticket zero rated. Kenyan payment for accommodation, no SA VAT, therefore we can't claim it in an SA VAT return. Subsistence allowance, supply of money, no input VAT. I know you can write more, but it's only out of 3, so you need to do it. And then, even though these are provided to an employee, it's for business purposes, therefore there's no fringe benefits and no VAT in it, so there's a 4th mark there. So available for, limited to 3. Communication skills and logical argument, 1 mark. 20 marks within a test. Okay. Now, when we go into part B, it's a totally different question. And the reason that I wanted you to do this question is because these 2 things are totally different from one another. This part, it's very specific. You know how many marks each part of the question is. With part B, it just says draft a memorandum to Tracy discussing the VAT and donations tax implications of the insurance claim and the actions taken by HGP to improve its reputation. So there can be a little bit of donations tax in there. But when we read through the question, we know it's 16 marks, but we don't know how much we are going to have to do. So I want you to think about how you would approach doing this question as far as answering it is concerned. So let's go back here. We've got it. And we're going to need to look at how all of the insurance claims came into being itself. So here's events subsequent to the financial year end. And let's do a read through. So what we're going to do here is when we read through this, we need to see how much we need to write down for each of the sections itself. Because the sections, we don't know how many marks each section is, it's unwise to start answering it immediately. We need to actually just get some sort of an idea on how much we need to write down. So just watch the way that I do this. It's out of 16 marks. So it says on 13 Jan, Jonathan Sickley, one of the senior sales managers, returned to work at HGP's head office after missing 3 months of work due to being hospitalized with COVID-19. He was immediately called into a meeting with Raymond Hartless, the chief financial officer at the time. Okay. During the meeting, Jonathan was informed that whilst he was in hospital, a decision was taken to retrench him, the effective date being 31 December 2020. Jonathan did not take the news well. After storming out of the meeting, he removed a baseball bat, which he bought for his son's 15th birthday, from the boot of his car and proceeded to smash and consequently cause significant damage to Raymond's Mercedes C-Class motor vehicle. Unfortunately, HDP's contract with the security company had not been renewed, and there was thus no security guards on duty to prevent Jonathan from hitting the cars with his baseball bat. Not satisfied with that damage to the motor vehicle, Jonathan then rushed to HGP's delivery area, where he poured diesel over a truck that was carrying snow globes depicting the Big Five animals of South Africa. These snow globes had been assembled on behalf of African Curios Pty Limited and were the property of African Curios Pty Limited. By now, Raymond had caught up with Jonathan and tried to dissuade him from lighting the diesel, but Jonathan nonetheless lit the fuse and the truck exploded. Jonathan suffered debilitating injuries and Raymond was killed instantly. A forklift that had been standing next to the truck was lifted by the force of the explosion and thrown 40 meters, in the process destroying a house that was being used for staff accommodation. The accommodation had been provided to 5 staff members at R1,000 per month. The company's finance production was dramatically affected by Raymond's death, and the directors acted swiftly in appointing Bongani Ramabulana to the CFO position on 18 Jan 2021. Bongani decided to use the first 6 weeks of his employment appointment to ensure that he thoroughly understood all aspects of the business, and consequently the existing HGP staff were left to deal with all the accounting issues that arose during the period. Tracy Swartz assumed responsibility for the finance function until 1 March 2021. She asked you to assist her with the following queries. So this is what the question's on, the insurance claim. It says Tracy submitted an insurance claim for the damage caused by Jonathan Sickley late in January 2021. All the assets had been insured by Bright Spark, and the policy included insurance on third-party goods not owned by HGP. So guys, what's going to happen? Okay. The required asked you for all of the VAT and donations tax implications. So we need to list the transactions. So first and foremost, there's a whole lot of insurance claims over here. So what it might be best to do is, rather than repeating stuff all of the time, it's normally best in a question like this to go and just state all of the laws with it. Now, if you can't remember the stuff, again, if you've tagged your book properly using the tag sheet that I've given you, you can find section 8.8. It's the tag will say insurance payments for that. And it says on a contract of insurance, it's deemed to be the consideration received, so whatever they pay you out, on the date of receipt of that payment. So that is, timing is when they make the payment, and it will not apply to the total reinstatement of goods. So it's a deemed output VAT when on the date of receipt. How much is the deemed output equal to? The amount of the payment. Okay, unless it's a reinstatement of goods itself. So starting off the solution, I would automatically put that in. So they've asked for a memo, so please do it. To, from, re, and a date. If you're not going to do that, you're not going to get the marks. Okay. Guys, dear Tracy, and there's your thing, just a general thing on insurance. Indemnity payments are a deemed supply in terms of Section 8.8 of the Act, and output VAT will be levied on the payments. For VAT purposes, they're accounted for in the period in which the payment is made. As all the payments are made in February, this will be put into your February VAT return itself. Now let's do each individual transaction. So remember, guys, how many marks is this out of? It's out of 16. Let's see how many transactions we're dealing with. So basically, by doing what I've just done, you've probably started off with 18, and you put it in memo format. It's 1 mark off that. And what's going to happen? Sorry, 16. It's out of, sorry. And we probably put 2 marks down for insurance claims. We're probably looking for another 13 marks. So let's see how many transactions there are. Remember, it's VAT and donations tax. So 400,000 Rand for Raymond's Mercedes. That's the first VAT entry. The company bought the scrap vehicle from the company for 8,000 Rand. That's VAT number 2. Okay, and then donated it to a local nursery school. There could be VAT 3, plus there could be donations tax 1 over there. Okay, 800,000 including VAT for the truck. That's VAT 4. Okay, the company bought the truck new and unused 2 years before the incident. There's VAT 5 for a discussion there. There's probably a mark there. 100,000 for the snow globes. That's VAT 6. Okay, even though there was no insurance contract between the parties and the terms of the agreement indemnified HGP from any losses. However, okay, HGP wants to ensure that it retains African Kuros as a client, so HGP paid them 100,000 Rand. Plus, there could be VAT there, plus there could be donations tax. That would be donations tax too. 690 was paid out to HGP for the destruction of the staff accommodation. That would be VAT 8. Okay. BSI spent 280,000 Rand on a new forklift to replace the forklift that was destroyed during the explosion. VAT 9. Okay. The new forklift was delivered to HGP. HGP was delighted as the old forklift was worth approximately 50,000 Rand during its age. Okay, so Bright Spark gave them a new asset. Okay, so there are a whole lot of transactions here. It says the story of the retrenchment of the staff member during the lockdown pandemic. Lockdown and Jonathan's subsequent actions caused HGP reputational damage. HGP therefore decided to donate 3,000 hours of community service. That's donations tax 3. HGP spent 150,000 wages on the community projects and also ran a promotion giving away beer bottles to disadvantaged communities on the trading stock with a cost of 200 and a fair market value of 480. So that's more VAT, that's VAT 10. So guys, we've got 10 VAT items, we've got 3 donations tax items, 13 marks approximately left in the solution, so we don't need to do very much detail of all of the stuff. Now, I prefer to list all of the transactions like this because that will give me an idea of how many marks I need to do. If it's out of 25 marks, I'll try to do at least 2 points per item. If it is out of 39 marks, I'll try to do 3 points per item. Okay, but I've got 13 items here and I will be brief. I might write 2 marks down if I want to, because normally there'll be more marks in the solution than there'll be on the mark plan, but I just need to be complete. And as I write something down, I'm going to discuss it. So it says 400,000 Rand for Raymond's Mercedes C-Class, which was scrapped. The company, okay, so what's going to happen? It's an insurance claim. What happens when we bought the Mercedes C-Class? That would have been denied when we subsequently dispose of it, because input VAT was denied when we bought the motor car. There's going to be no output VAT when we sell it. Okay, and there it is. Guys, input VAT denied when we bought it, no output VAT charged when we sell it as a payout for the Mercedes itself. Number 2, company bought the scrap vehicle from the insurance company for 8,000 and donated it to a local nursery school for use in the playground. Guys, it's not been bought for VAT for business purposes. If we're not buying it for business purposes, we can't claim VAT when we buy it. Okay, when we give it to the nursery school now as an 8,000 Rand donation, it's not a supply of a good or service in the course of furtherance of an enterprise. There's not going to be any VAT when we give it to the nursery school. In addition, it's an 8,000 Rand donation to the nursery school. The nursery school is not a public benefit organization. They do not state that in the question. And what's going to happen with the donation? It'll be a casual gift, less than 10,000 Rand. Companies have a 10,000 Rand casual gifts exemption. The 8,000 Rand will be set off against that 10,000 Rand casual gifts exemption and will be no donations tax whatsoever. So there, purchase of the car, not for business purposes, no input VAT claimed. Donation will constitute as a donation as defined at a market value of 8,000. No donations tax because there's a casual donations exemption. Okay, let's carry on. Next one. And guys, you should cross them off as you go. Okay, 3, deferred tax 1. Next one, 800,000 excluding VAT for the truck. Truck is bought new and unused from a non-vendor before the incident. So when we bought the vehicle, we didn't claim input, but it was bought from a non-vendor new. The fact that we didn't claim input doesn't mean that we can't charge output. You can only not charge output if it's an exempt supply or input VAT was denied. Neither of those two things apply here. We just bought it from a non-vendor. So notwithstanding the fact we didn't claim when we bought it, we will still charge VAT when we sell it. So here it is. Amount of 800,000 is VATable, and we need to work out the output VAT. Okay. When the truck was acquired 2 years ago, no input VAT was claimed on acquisition as it was bought new from a non-vendor. Okay. Exclusion for output VAT in terms of Section 814 disposal only applies to assets in which input VAT was denied. Input VAT was not denied, so we are still going to charge VAT in this case. So, number 6, 100,000 for big snow globes that have been on the truck. So, this is an insurance claim that you receive 100,000 Rand. Now, I know that they're not your snow globes, but it is your insurance contract. And if someone pays you something in terms of an insurance contract, you need to account for VAT on it. So what's going to actually end up happening as far as this is concerned? There's going to be output VAT of 100,000 times 15 over 115 equals 12,821 on the compensation. It's your insurance contract. You need to pay the VAT on it. And moving on with the question itself, what's going to happen? It then says, you paid 100,000 to African Curios, even though there was no insurance contract between the companies. Now you're paying 100,000. You're not buying snow globes. You're not doing any of that. You're just saying, here's 100,000 Rand. It's a supply of cash. There is no VAT on the supply of cash when you give it. It's a supply of money when you do this. And then what else is there in the question? There's also, is there donations tax here? What's going to happen? Guys, we didn't do it out of the goodness of our hearts. We wanted to retain African Curios as a future client. Even though we could normally discuss donations tax for 5 or 6 marks, we just need to get to the gist of it. This donation was not done with genuine benevolence. It was done because you wanted to retain a customer. It's not a proper donation. It's not done out of the goodness of your heart. There's no donations tax on that, and we will not need to levy any donations tax as far as this is concerned. Okay? And because there was no pure liberality or disinterested benevolence, we want to retain it. There's no donations tax that will be calculated on that one itself. Moving on. 690,000 was paid out to HGP for the destruction of the staff accommodation. The amount was used to rebuild a house. Guys, residential accommodation, a simple thing. It's exempt supplies residential accommodation, therefore there'll be no VAT on it because it's an exempt supply. Moving on. Next thing, number 9. They spent 280,000 Rand, BSI, that's the insurance company, spent 280 on a new forklift to replace a forklift that was destroyed. During the explosion, the new forklift was delivered to HGP on 3 March 2021. HGP was delighted as the old forklift was worth approximately 50,000. What happens when a In an insurance claim, they reinstate the goods. There's no VAT on reinstatement of goods. We saw that as part of this. 8.8 will not apply when payment relates to total reinstatements of goods. Therefore, what's going to happen with this? There will be no VAT on the transaction itself. Terms section 8.8, no deemed supply when insurance reinstates goods that have been destroyed. Next thing, guys, back to the question. Sorry. It says, retrenchment to the staff member. From a promo perspective, we donated 3,000 hours of time. Remember, donations tax is only levied on the supply of property. We can donate as much time as we like. It is not classified as subject to donations tax when we donate time. It's only when you donate property. Because we didn't donate any property, it's not a donation as defined, not subject to donations tax. And last but not least, we gave away promotional stock to disadvantaged communities at a cost of 200 and a market value of 480, distributed as a sales promotion. When we sell promotional material, there's actually a sale at zero value here. We're doing it as part of a promotion to promote our business itself. What happens with that? It's section 1023 of the Act. And what's going to happen, guys? That will be zero on the transaction because supplies for no consideration for business purposes have zero VAT on them, section 1023. And guys, it's also not done out of the goodness of our heart. It was given out as a business promotion. This is not a donation subject to donations tax. So that is what you've got over there with the VAT of zero, not subject to donations tax. And there's the layout of the question. Now, the whole key to doing this properly was to list the number of transactions and see how much you needed to write it by. Because if you wanted to write everything in your head, I'm sure you could have spent an extra half an hour doing this, but you needed to manage the time. And what I want to do just at this point in time is I just want to actually compare the two requireds themselves, and I want you to think about how to answer things in an exam. If there's specific marks, you limit to the specific marks. If there's a big general question like this, what do? You list the number of transactions and you modify your solution based on the number of marks that are available in the mark plan itself. Very, very important for you to do that. And remember, discussion questions work that way. Let's look at part C now. It says, calculate the amount of VAT that HGP needs to pay to SARS with respect to its January VAT return. Provide a short reason for any amounts you may omit for the calculation that you deem not to be subject to VAT. 6 marks. So if you put a 0 down, you get the mark for the reason, not for the 0 itself. Okay. Looking at the question, let's go look at what's happening inside the question itself. So let's go back. Yes. Completing of the January VAT return. It says HGP is in the process of completing its January VAT return. Currently a net VAT output amount of 781.27 is owing to SARS as per the general ledger account. So how many transactions? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe there's a 6th one in there. It's out of 6 marks. It's 1 mark per calc. So, and it says calculate in the required. So it's a calculation. I don't need to discuss this. So we need to do this nice and simply. Okay. This should be very, very quick to do. So we'll start with net amount owing in the solution. So what's going to happen? Net amount owing 781.27. And let's read. Now I would have done this first in the question if it was me, if I was answering the solution. So it's a 3 million key man policy. Key man policies on the life of Raymond Hartlist. Okay, what's going to happen with that? Life assurance does not have a VAT implication. It's exempt. So it's an exempt financial service. 1 mark. Next one. HGP received a legal bill for 5750 and it's from one of its lawyers. HGP Insurance Company had refused to pay an amount of 500 for the disability claim with respect to Jonathan's injuries. The insurance company stated Jonathan had intentionally maimed himself and has precluded any payment to HGP on the policy. HGP had therefore consulted its lawyers on the question of legality for the denial of the input claim. So guys, that claim is for an exempt supply. So that lawyer's fee, you cannot claim VAT on because it's for an exempt supply. So yes, I know there's normally VAT claims on legal fees, but in this case you can't do it because it's dealing with something that is not for a taxable supply. It says on 22 December, HGP paid in advance Raymond's subscription to a local golf club. On 27 Jan 2021, the golf club refunded the fee. Okay, what would happen with a golf club membership? Input VAT would be denied. So when they refund us, we didn't claim VAT when we got it. We're not going to have any output VAT when we get the fee back. Okay. It then says HGP made a payment of 4 million for parts needed to refurbish its plant on 25 Jan 2021, and the parts were shipped from Miami in the United States of America. The bank statement showed a deduction of 67,845,127, which included bank charges of 271,345 for the provision of currency for the transaction. The parts arrived in January on 12 February 2021. So as far as the payment for parts is concerned, there's no VAT yet. It hasn't come across the border yet, because it's only going to be delivered in the next month. This is a January VAT return. So for payments of parts, you should put a dash down and say, not yet any VAT implications on it, because it hasn't come through customs yet. But the bank charges portion will have a VAT implication, and you're supposed to calculate VAT on the bank charges there. So payment for the parts, dash, not yet. Bank charges, there will be VAT on, because it's part of your January bank charges. And then the next one, guys. To improve morale, HGP entered into a contract with an overseas music supplier to use their catalog to pipe music into its factories and into customer centers. HGP pays 4132 monthly for these streaming services. The relevant VAT form was completed for the imported service, and HGP paid 5234 output VAT to SARS. So please remember, this is an imported service. Because it's music being piped in, it's entertainment. We couldn't claim input VAT on this. That means we needed to fill out a form when we paid for the overseas services and pay the output VAT to SARS, because we only need to pay the output VAT when we can't claim the input. And guys, in this question, can we claim the input itself? Absolutely not, because it's a provision of entertainment, and there's your marks for it, and net VAT payable. So third type of question, you can get discussion questions that are general like part B, specific like part A, you get a number crunch like part C, and then the last question deals with journal entries. That is the other way that you could get asked stuff within a question as well. So let's go back to the required and let's read. What does it say in the required? It says prepare the correct journal entries for the month of February 2021 for the transactions 1 and 2 as noted in the February queries. Give a brief explanation on the calculation of the VAT of each of these transactions. So guys, we got to do the correct journal entries, not correcting. Correcting is where we need to reverse the old entry and process a new one. The correct journal entries. So please, when you're doing a journal entries question, you need to see whether you're doing correct journal entries or correcting journal entries. And you need to be able to work through this. So let's just have a look at the queries themselves. Okay. So going back into the questions, your Feb VAT queries, there they are, transaction 1. It says Bongani Ramabulana was appointed as a new CFO on 18 Jan 2021. HGP and Bongani's request bought an Isuzu single cab vehicle for 490 including VAT on 19 Jan 2021 and subsequently claimed VAT input when journalizing the transaction. This has already been considered in the 781-7 stated in paragraph 5.3 with regards to the Jan VAT return. Now guys, they're only asking for the February queries here, so that's not part of the solution necessarily. Okay, if you wanted to do that, but we could put a journal entry down. It says the Isuzu was given to Bongani to use as a company car. The correct fringe benefit was included in the January VAT return. Bongani realized he'd made a mistake in selecting a single cab and 3 days after receiving the vehicle, returned the car to HGP. The workshop manager organized for the Isuzu to be converted into a double cab, and Bongani used his own car for business until 4 Feb. On 5 Feb, Bongani received the renovated double cab Isuzu as his company car, and HGP received an invoice for the conversion, which cost 103,500 the end of February. So there are two journals here. There's one journal for the 103,500, converting from a single cab to a double cab, and then there'll be a fringe benefit as well. And remember, he's only going to get the car from 5 February for a fringe benefit, so he's only got it for 24 out of the 28 days of the month. So let's have a look at the solution itself. So first journal entry, debit motor car, credit creditor. Guys, it's 103.5, no input VAT claimed, because if you're converting something into a motor car, input VAT on motor cars is denied. Therefore, you may not claim any VAT on it. As far as the fringe benefits concerned, guys, have a look. It's 0.6%. Why? Because when we bought this car, we claimed input VAT on the single cab. Therefore, we got to use the 0.6%. I don't care that it's a motor car now. We claimed input VAT when we bought it. Times, what is the revised cost? 490, what we paid for it. We also paid another 103,500 to get it converted. Okay, so that's your new cost of the car, times 100 over 115. Have to do that as part of your fringe benefit calc. Times 24 over 28. We didn't have it for the first 4 days of the month, so times 24 over 28. Times 1 month, because you submit VAT returns monthly. It's a February VAT calc. Times 15 over 115. And there's your journal entry itself. Carrying on, guys. And the next part, transaction 2. During Feb 2014, HGP acquired a building near one of its factories for an amount of 2 million. This 4-story building was used in 2 ways. The ground floor was used as a factory store. The other 3 stories are used as residential flats. SARS agreed that 25% of the building was used for taxable supplies and 75% for exempt supplies. The residential flats being exempt supplies. Input VAT of 61,404 at a rate of 14% was claimed in the February 2014 VAT return. The usage allocation has not changed over the years. During January 2021, HGP entered into an agreement to sell the building on 22 Feb 2021. Sale took place, new owner paid 6 million. Now guys, remember, this is a sale of a transaction, 6 million for the building. How are we going to do this? Well, there's going to be output VAT on the disposal of fixed assets. So let's just start with the second journal entry itself, guys. What's going to happen here? Sorry, just going back here. Guys, how much was this building sold for? 5 million. Okay, and they transferred 5 million for the building itself. So we're going to sell the building. We need to account for that. So debit bank 5 million. Output VAT 652,174. That's 5 million times 15 over 115. And how much do you get for selling of the fixed assets? 4,347. And remember, because we didn't claim all of the input VAT when we bought the building, we are now allowed to claim it when we dispose of it. Output VAT's at 100%. We originally claimed 25% of the VAT. So what are we allowed to do? We're allowed to claim 75% over here of the VAT times 15 over 115 times by the lower of cost or market value. Cost was 2 million, market value is now 5, so we're going to use the 2 million. And I don't care that you've actually claimed it at 14% originally. The new VAT rule is 15%, so you'll do it based on 15 over 115 now. And there's your amount that you can claim on disposal. Okay, so this is a very, very good question for you to do. The reason why it's a really good one is I've tried to show you all of the things. Part A dealt with specific VAT discussions where you knew the number of marks. Number 2, discussions, but you didn't know the number of marks. 3, a VAT calculation, a VAT return, which you can get asked. And the 4th one is journal entries. So these are the 4 ways that VAT can be asked. This was a 50-mark question.